Mr. Hallway, how have you been doing this week?
I had a rough week. My anxiety's really been bothering me. I had an incident at my girlfriend's house. I went over there for the first time the other day, and I found out that she has a very large dog. And as long as I can remember, I've been terribly afraid of dogs, and I had to just leave the house as quick as possible. And I'm just very anxious and worried now that it's going to affect our relationship going forward.
Oh, it sounds like you're having some significant distress over this, but at the same time, you don't want it to ruin your relationships. You want to try and find a solution. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, to this point, I've been very happy with our relationship. Everything's been great. But this dog is really going to cause some problems. Normally, I can have ways of avoiding dogs. I really doesn't affect my day-to-day life. If I see a dog outside in the park or something like that, I can walk the other direction. It's pretty easy to avoid. When I go to my family members' houses, typically they keep it locked away. It's in a large group setting, or I just avoid going over if it's a small setting where they might be out in the first place. So I just don't know how this will happen from my girlfriend's house, because I can't expect her to hide away her dog every time I go to her house if we're going to have a serious relationship.
So it seems like you normally just avoid any situation that involves dogs, but you understand that this isn't really a realistic option in your relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I care about this girl. I don't want to ruin the relationship, but it's just, this is something that is not going to end well if we keep going forward the way we are.
Well, it seems like it's causing some significant issues in your life and really interfering with things. Do you know if you've had any sort of negative experience with dogs in the past, or if there's anything significant that's happened?
Nothing specific comes to mind that I can remember, but my parents always tell me about an incident when I was very young, maybe 2 or 3 years old, and a big, playful dog came after me and knocked me on the ground. They claim it was no malicious intent. I was never bit or anything like that, but it's just one of those incidents where the animal overpowered me, and I don't know, maybe subconsciously that incident sticks out in my mind. I don't remember much of it, but that's something I've always been told, and since I remember, I've always been afraid of dogs.
Wow, I mean, that seems like it would be scary for anyone to have a dog come running at you and knock you over and not even know what their intentions are, let alone a child. So I can imagine that was a pretty traumatic incident.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't remember, but bottom line is I'm just worried that this is going to now affect my life. It hasn't been much of an issue as far as my daily life, but now that I'm in this great relationship, I would hate for it to be ruined over a dog.
So what is it that you're really hoping to get out of therapy?
Well, I want to try to keep the relationship going strong the way it has been, and for that to happen, I mean, I can't make her give up the dog, so I have to overcome my fear of dogs.
Okay, well, that's something that we can definitely work towards, and I mean, this process can take some time, and it can be difficult, but I feel confident that we can help lower your anxiety level, and I feel hopeful that you can overcome this fear.
I really hope so.
So to start off, I just want to give you a little information about my approach and what to expect. I use a technique called systematic desensitization, and the way this works is that you're gradually exposed to your fear, starting off with situations that produce the least amount of anxiety and building up to situations that provoke the most fear. And the theory behind this really is that slowly exposing you to the triggers will habituate the fear response and eventually neutralize these situations so they no longer produce anxiety.
Okay, so kind of step by step.
Yeah, so you mentioned before that you typically just avoid the situation that causes you anxiety, but in this process, you won't be able to do that, and this can be initially distressing, but you'll see that your anxiety level will eventually decrease. So, do you have any questions about the process?
I mean, it's kind of nerve-wracking, but it seems pretty straightforward. I guess we can give it a try.
Okay, so our first step is creating a fear hierarchy. And what this is a list of smaller situations and they're related to your fear of dogs, and it's pretty much arranged in order from the least to most anxiety provoking. You just understand that general concept?
Yeah.
Okay. So first, to generate the list, you're going to list off any situations or thoughts that are related to your fear of dogs. And for each of the situations or thoughts, I want you to give it a rating from 0 to 100. And really just a rating of your level of discomfort. So, for example, if you drove up to your girlfriend's house and you saw the dog outside on her lawn, and you felt that this gave you a moderate level of anxiety, maybe you'd rate it around a 50.
Sounds all right.
Okay, so here, you can go ahead and here's a pen. You can start really just listing off any situations that cause you anxiety, and we can discuss them one by one.
Well, I mean, I've been really worried about this whole situation, so I've been, even just thinking about it makes me anxious. Thinking about having to go over to the house and face the dog.
Okay, so why don't you write that one down, and what would you rate that as?
Just my thoughts alone, 30. I'm just really anxious.
Okay. What other situations?
Having to encounter the dog, like walk into a room and it's there. I don't know how I would deal with that.
Okay, so being in the same room as the dog.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. I think we can even break that up even further and actually have it be maybe that the dog's in the same room with you, but he's in his crate, or the dog's in the same room with you, but he's on the leash. So what do you think about those two situations?
Well, contained in the crate, I guess, would be almost like a different room. It's kind of a blockade, so maybe 40.
Okay.
And the leash, I don't know, that's pushing it a little bit. I'd say up to 70.
Okay. What about any other situations?
Oh, if it came up and tried to interact with me, like I know dogs like to sniff people, so that would be very nerve-wracking, I think.
Okay. Do you think you could break that one down even further like we did with the last? So maybe having the dog be in the crate and just sniffing your hand against there, or being outside the crate and sniffing while he's on the leash?
Yeah, I guess being contained by the crate, I'll put as maybe a 60.
Okay.
And leash 75.
For being outside of the crate on the leash?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so what about any other situations?
Well, I mean, if I got more comfortable with it, I imagine I'd have to let it interact with me. Say we were watching a movie and it had to sit next to me, something like that. That would be terrifying at this point, but maybe we could work up to it.
Okay. So what about maybe if first the dog was on the leash sitting next to you?
Okay.
What do you think you would rate that as?
Do 80 with that?
Okay. And then if the dog was sitting next to you off the leash, what do you think you would rate that as?
90.
Alrighty. All right, do you have anything else you can think of?
Oh, I actually have physical contact with it. I never want to really pet dogs, but I guess if I had to, it would be like a 98, 99.
Okay, right up there. Okay, so this is a pretty good list to start off of just various situations that you're fearing. So what we want to do is reorganize the list based on the ratings that you gave it. So you can put a 1 next to the lowest rated item and work your way up based on the ratings that you gave each one. So if you want to just put the numbers right there next to it. Okay, done? Okay, so, I mean, I really want to make sure this process is gradual, especially in the beginning steps when things can feel very distressing at the start. So I feel like it might be a good idea to add in a few more situations again, towards the start of the list, so you really feel that this is a gradual process and you're not completely overwhelmed. All right, so what do you think about adding a step between 1 and 2, maybe which involves you being in the house but being in a different room from the dog?
I guess if it was kept upstairs, it's kind of like when I go over to my family member's house, so maybe 35 for that one.
Okay, 35. And then maybe if we add something between 2 and 3, which involves you standing maybe direct, like right next to the crate with the dog inside, but you're not putting your hand near the crate yet or really interacting with the dog yet, just standing close enough.
Yes, what a 50.
Okay, so I think this is a pretty good list. Let me see if we have the same list here. So the final would be 1 would be thinking about going to the house while the dog is there. 2 would be in the house while the dog is there but in a different room. 3 would be in the same room with the dog in his crate. 4 would be standing next to the crate with the dog inside. 5 would be letting the dog sniff your hand while he's still in the crate. 6 would be letting the dog be in the same room with you while on a leash. 7, let the dog sniff you while on the leash. 8, let the dog sit next to you on the leash. 9, let the dog sit next to you off the leash. And then 10 would be to pet the dog. So is that everything you have there?
Yep.
Okay, so now that your fear hierarchy is complete, what we're going to do is work through each of these items over the course of the next few weeks. And for homework this week, I want you to start with item number 1. And I want you to take a little time every day and think about having to go into the house with the dog and try to keep track of your automatic thoughts that you're having and try and write down your anxiety level. And we'll be able to review this in the next session so we can see how the first step went and really evaluate moving on to the next step. Do you feel comfortable doing this?
Yeah, I think I can do my best.
Okay. So this is a great start. I really want you to know that this process can be difficult and it can take some time, but I really do feel confident that we can lower your anxiety level and we can really work to overcome this fear.
I think we can. Let's do it.
Alrighty. So if you don't have any other questions, I'll see you next week.
All right, see you next week.